after 4 years of being able to do what I damn well please all day long, I still get these waves of bitterness that I had to spend so many years putting in all this time to get a paycheck, and then struggling to have enough time and emotional space to make art after work. But eventually, I had a really decent portfolio. I was represented all together over a 35-year period. I was represented for about 30 of those years in different cities. I've had solo exhibits. My work has been written about. My sculpture was written about. And in the early 90s, I committed to taking classes and began studying playwriting. And by the time you study playwriting for about 7 years, and you have acting teachers beating you up over here, and you have playwriting teachers beating you up over there, you're just in way deep. And theater became my primary art form. And I managed to tour nationally while I had a full-time job as a paralegal. Day job. It was a fact that was in my life that I had to deal with and try to keep it from being an obstacle. It doesn't really matter anymore why I started making moving image art instead. I think that there are more elements in moving image that I have a knack for. There's just a combination of things. It's just luck of the draw. You're good at what you're good at, and I'm good at this moving image thing for whatever reason. But the fact is, because I didn't really want to have a day job, I told my father when I was 8 years old that I was going to be an artist when I grew up, and he pretty much already accepted this. And he was probably glad, knowing that I wanted to be an artist and I didn't really care about anything else. He was probably relieved to have that information right away when I'm 8. And so he can tell me right away and won't have to wait until I'm 23, living at home and not having a job, or 30, living at home and not having a job or being barely employed. He told me that's fine. But if you want to be an artist, you're going to have to learn how to do something for a living, because you are not going to make a living as an artist. Oh my God. I had this temp job at it was interior design. They were not just decorators. And we're having a staff meeting one day, and my boss she's looking at all the elements that the different staff people are putting together to present to a client, and this package was worth $150,000, and it was just the design. And I immediately think about my father. That was not true. What you told me was not true, because I asked my boss, I said, you mean people will pay you that kind of money for your ideas? And they all looked at me like I had two heads. Like, where have you been? Well, I've been in law offices. Go figure. That too was water under the bridge at this point. I don't know why. I started thinking about it last fall that I thought about working in law offices, and at some point it was one of my earlier jobs when I think I'd only been working for about 5 years, and I was talking about some art project, or I had gotten into what for me was a really good show, or it might have been the year that I was picked up by a major gallery in San Francisco I'd been picked up as a sculptor, and I was pulled aside by a supervisor. It wasn't even my supervisor. This person supervised a different group. They were even in a different part of the building, and she told me that I shouldn't talk about being an artist at work because it made other people uncomfortable. I express myself well. I get along with people, but if my parents had never made me leave my room when I was a kid, I would still be there. So I don't know what it was that I said. I don't know whether it was just a supervisor or whether it was somebody else in the office that had bitched about my talking about being an artist and getting into a show or picked up by a gallery or whatever it was. But I was thinking about that. And then I'm reminded of this staff meeting when I found out that my boss's design firm had gotten, essentially, it was $150,000 for drawings. That's what it was. For drawings, $150,000. And having to hold myself in all day long. I mean, holding what was most important to me, because I really did develop some good work habits. So I'm thinking about holding myself in. I'm thinking about sometimes only being able to work on art for like half an hour, 2 hours after, when you're a woodcarver and you're living in an apartment building, especially my sculpture, which was mostly life size. I made little pieces of sculpture for a couple of years and I was over it. I had no sooner started. No. I want something at least as tall as I am. You're doing that, and every once in a while, I was using an electric saw to make major cuts. Well, you're only gonna be able to do that up until about 8 or 9 o'clock. So a lot of times, I was only able to put in 2 hours of time at the most on a weekday. And I didn't have a personal assistant. So on the weekends, the time was also limited because I would have to take care of the basic life things. So there was always a limitation of time. There's a limitation of socializing when you choose to live that way. And you can't talk about being an artist at work. It's like that part of your life doesn't exist. Other people talk about their kids or they talk about their vacation, but I just got used to not talking about it because I just didn't want to get slapped down like I had been by that supervisor who was not even my supervisor. I was doing something legitimate that was not valued in the environment where I was spending such a major part of my time. And what that resulted in is what I call half-life. I lived a half-life. There's always somebody who's barely there, only partly there. And I'm not talking about whether they do their job or not. I'm talking about how alive they seem to be. My husband of 32 years and I once lived in this the first floor of this huge house, which had been an orphanage around the turn of the century. This was in Lincoln, Nebraska. So it's not exactly the snow belt, but in the winter, it's really cold. And we only heated about half of our flat because it was just so expensive to heat the rest of it. So in the winter, we were only living in a part of the flat, and it was almost like we didn't know what was going on in the rest of the flat. I am thinking of a house where people, for whatever reason, whatever their own reason for living a half-life is, they only live in part of this house. I've been thinking about it for over a year. The idea hasn't gone away, and now I'm actually starting to get images and ideas for characters and how many characters and what their basic thing is about why they're only living a half-life.